Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiance, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime was unlike anything humans had ever built. The station stretched for miles in every direction, its surface covered with docking bays that could hold ships the size of cities. Lights from a dozen different alien civilizations twinkled across its hull like stars. "First time seeing it never gets old," said Lieutenant Lisa Carter, checking her equipment one more time. She was in charge of the weapons demonstration that would be part of today's meeting. Her gear sat in neat rows in the cargo bay. Rifles, missiles, plasma cannons, and even a small nuclear device for show. Morrison nodded, trying to keep his nerves steady. Today, humanity would formally request to join the Galactic Coalition. After 3 years of radio communications and careful negotiations, this was their chance to become part of the larger universe. Earth's population held its breath, waiting to hear if they would be accepted among the stars. The docking procedure took 2 hours. Coalition technology guided the human ship into a berth with invisible tractor beams. Morrison's crew watched in amazement as their ship was moved like a toy in the hands of an unseen giant. When the airlock sealed, they heard the hiss of atmosphere equalizing. "Remember," Morrison told his team as they prepared to disembark, "we represent all of humanity today. Stay professional, stay calm, and follow my lead." The airlock opened to reveal a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some kind of living metal that shifted colors as they walked. Soft music played from nowhere, and the air smelled faintly of flowers that didn't exist on Earth. Their guide was a tall, thin alien with blue skin and 4 arms. It introduced itself as Diplomat Veltar and spoke perfect English through a small device attached to its throat. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," it said in a voice like wind chimes. "The Coalition representatives are eager to meet you." The meeting chamber was enormous. A circular table sat in the center, surrounded by chairs designed for a dozen different body types. Already seated were the aliens Morrison had only seen in video transmissions. The Vextar looked like giant insects with gleaming black shells and compound eyes that reflected rainbow colors. The Zelnari were crystalline beings that rang like bells when they moved. The Mordun appeared as shifting clouds of gas contained in transparent suits. "Humans of Earth," announced a Vextar with gold markings on its shell, "I am Commander Zuwaxthal. We welcome you to these proceedings." Morrison took his seat, feeling small among these ancient civilizations. "Thank you, Commander. We're honored to be here." The next hour passed in formal presentations. Each alien species described their contributions to the Coalition. The Vextar provided advanced computing. The Zelnari offered energy technology. The Mordun shared their knowledge of atmospheric sciences. When it was Morrison's turn, he spoke about human culture, art, and their desire to learn from others. "Fascinating," said a Zelnari representative, its voice creating harmonics that made the walls hum. "And what does humanity offer in terms of technology? Military capabilities?" This was the moment they had prepared for. Morrison nodded to Carter, who stood and activated her portable display. Images of human weapons appeared in the air above the table. "These are our standard infantry rifles," Carter began, showing sleek metal weapons. "They fire projectiles at high velocity using chemical propellants." She moved to the next image. "Our missiles use explosive warheads and can be guided to targets from great distances." The aliens leaned forward with what seemed like interest. Carter continued her presentation, showing plasma weapons, orbital defense platforms, and finally, nuclear warheads. "Our most powerful weapons use atomic energy," she explained. "They can destroy entire cities." Silence filled the chamber for a long moment. Then Morrison heard a sound he didn't recognize, a soft chittering that the translation device identified as Vextar laughter. Commander Zuaxthol's compound eyes seemed to sparkle with amusement. "Projectile weapons?" the commander said, its voice carrying clear amusement. "You still use chemical explosives?" The Zelnari representative chimed in literally, its crystalline body resonating with what could only be described as condescending tones. "How, primitive, do you also fight with sticks and stones?" Even the gaseous Mordun seemed to ripple with what might have been amusement. "Atomic weapons." It wheezed through its translator. "We abandoned such crude devices millennia ago. Morrison felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his voice steady. These weapons have served us well in our conflicts. Conflict among yourselves, no doubt, said ZYXthal. Species of your development level typically struggle with internal violence before achieving true civilization. The meeting continued for another hour, but the tone had completely changed. The aliens no longer asked questions about human capabilities. Instead, they discussed humanity as if they weren't in the room. Words like developing primitive and potential came up repeatedly. When the formal session ended, Diplomat Veltar approached Morrison with what might have been sympathy. The Coalition has reached a decision, it said. Humanity will be accepted as a member. Morrison felt a moment of relief before Veltar continued. You will be classified as a Level 1 civilization, a protectorate status. This means the Coalition will provide guidance and protection while you develop more advanced capabilities. Your military technology will be supplemented by Coalition defensive systems. Your expansion into space will be supervised by Coalition advisors. The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. Protectorate status. They weren't being welcomed as equals. They were being treated like children who needed adult supervision. We appreciate the Coalition's offer, Morrison said carefully, but humanity has always valued its independence. Of course, said ZYXthal, joining the conversation. All developing species feel that way initially. You'll understand the benefits of Coalition guidance once you see how much you have to learn. As the human delegation returned to their ship, Carter walked beside Morrison in silence. Only when they were safely aboard the Defiance did she speak. Captain, she said quietly, they didn't just reject our weapons. They rejected us. Morrison stared out at the vast station surrounding their small ship. Somewhere in those gleaming corridors, alien civilizations that had traveled the stars for thousands of years had just patted humanity on the head and told them to sit in the corner with the other children. Maybe they did, Lieutenant, he said finally, but they made one mistake. What's that, sir? Morrison's jaw tightened as he watched alien ships moving through space with casual grace that made human vessels look like toys. They think they know what humans are capable of. The journey back to Earth would take 3 weeks. Morrison spent the time writing his report, choosing each word carefully. The Coalition had laughed at human weapons. They had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. They had no idea how wrong they were. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the alien broadcast with growing anger. The Coalition Entertainment Network was showing footage from a Nexus Prime meeting, but they had edited it to make humanity look even more foolish. Dramatic music played as Carter demonstrated human weapons, followed by exaggerated alien laughter and commentary. Look at these primitive creatures, said the Vextar host, its translation coming through in a mocking tone. They still throw metal rocks at each other and think it makes them warriors. The broadcast cut to a comedy segment where actors in crude human costumes stumbled around hitting each other with foam weapons. The alien audience's laughter echoed through the Pentagon Situation Room. Turn it off, Sullivan said quietly. Colonel Ben Parker, her aide, reached for controls. Ma'am, there are 17 more networks running similar content. The Zelnari have a whole comedy series called Humans Say the Funniest Things. Sullivan closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. 3 days since Morrison's return, and Earth was already becoming the laughingstock of the galaxy. But the entertainment shows were just the beginning. The real damage was happening in the political sphere. What's the latest from the trade negotiations? She asked. Dr. Ryan Mitchell, the Pentagon's chief xenopsychologist, pulled up a holographic display. It's worse than we thought, Admiral. The Coalition isn't just mocking us, they're moving to exploit us. The display showed a map of human space. Red markers indicated where alien ships had been detected near human colonies. The Vextar had proposed a resource-sharing agreement for our asteroid mining operations. They want 90% of all extracted materials in exchange for advanced mining guidance. 90%, Sullivan repeated flatly. The Zelnari are offering to modernize our energy grid. They want control of all power generation on Earth and the colonies. They claim human fusion reactors are dangerous without proper oversight. Each new piece of information made Sullivan's anger burn hotter. What about our military? Mitchell switched to another display showing Coalition patrol routes. They're treating our space like their backyard. Scout ships from 6 different species are conducting safety inspections of human vessels. 3 merchant ships have been detained for carrying potentially hazardous primitive weapons, meaning the standard sidearms their crews carry for protection. Admiral Sullivan stood and walked to the window overlooking the Potomac River. Below, life continued as normal. People went to work. Children played in parks, and nobody knew that humanity's future was being decided in boardrooms on distant alien worlds. "Have you finished the psychological analysis?" she asked without turning around. "Yes, ma'am." Mitchell's voice carried a grim note. The Coalition species all share one common trait. They think in rigid patterns. The Vextar are pure logic machines. The Zelnari process information in crystalline structures that can't bend without breaking. The Mordun flow like gas. They can change shape, but not their basic nature. And humans, we're chaos, Admiral. Every human brain is wired differently. We adapt, improvise, change our thinking based on circumstances. To them, that looks like stupidity because we don't follow predictable patterns. Sullivan turned back to the room. So they see us as random animals that might accidentally cause problems. Exactly. They think they're being generous by offering to civilize us. In their minds, we should be grateful for the chance to become their junior partners. A communication alert sounded. Colonel Parker activated the secure channel, and the face of Colonel Amy Brooks appeared on the main screen. She was broadcasting from New Austin, humanity's newest colony world. "Admiral," Brooks said, her expression tense. "We have a situation." The image switched to an external camera showing space above the colony. A massive alien vessel hung in orbit, its hull decorated with the flowing patterns of Mordun design. "They arrived 6 hours ago," Brooks continued. "They're conducting what they call a cultural assessment of our colony. They want to interview our children about their education, examine our food production methods, and review our local government structure." "Did they request permission to enter our space?" Sullivan asked, though she already knew the answer. "No, ma'am. When I contacted them, they said that protectorate species don't have the authority to restrict Coalition access. They're treating our sovereignty like a joke." Sullivan exchanged glances with Mitchell. This was exactly what the xenopsychologist had predicted. The Coalition wasn't just ignoring human authority. They genuinely didn't understand that humans might object to uninvited visitors. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Brooks asked. Sullivan wanted to tell her to intercept the alien ship, to demand they leave human space immediately. But Earth's fleet consisted of ships with primitive weapons that the Coalition had already dismissed. Any aggressive action would be seen as proof that humans were too violent to govern themselves. "Stand down, Colonel," she said finally. "Monitor their activities and file a formal protest through diplomatic channels." Brooks' jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Understood, ma'am." After the transmission ended, the room fell silent. Finally, Colonel Parker spoke up. "Admiral, how long do we let this continue?" Sullivan looked at the map of human space, now dotted with alien ships moving freely through what should have been sovereign territory. Every day brought new trade agreements that looked more like surrendered documents. Every news broadcast carried more alien commentary about humanity's primitive nature. "Not much longer," she said quietly. That evening, Sullivan descended into the deepest levels of the Pentagon, past the normal security checkpoints, beyond the areas marked on any official blueprint, down corridors that existed in no database. She used her biometric identification 7 times before reaching a door marked only with the number 7. The room beyond contained 12 people seated around a plain metal table. No names were used, no ranks displayed. These were representatives from every major human space agency, military branch, and intelligence organization. They had been meeting in secret for 2 years, ever since humanity first detected alien signals. "Report," Sullivan said as she took her seat. The woman across from her, representing humanity's deep space monitoring network, spoke first. "Alien communication traffic has increased by 400% since the Nexus Prime meeting. They're discussing human space like it's already under their control. A man from the Mars colonies added, 3 more inspection teams are en route to our outer settlements. They're not asking permission. They're announcing their arrival times. Economic projections? Sullivan asked. If we accept their trade agreements, human civilization will be effectively bankrupt within 5 years, replied the representative from Earth's Economic Council. We'll be a client species, entirely dependent on coalition resources. Sullivan nodded grimly. Everything was proceeding as they had feared. The coalition strategy was clear: make humanity so dependent on alien technology and resources that independence became impossible. Are we ready to proceed with the alternative? She asked. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, each person nodded. Sullivan stood up. Then it's time to remind the galaxy what humans are really capable of. As the meeting ended and the participants dispersed through different exits, Sullivan remained behind. On the wall hung a simple plaque with words that had guided her through her entire career. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. The coalition thought they had humanity figured out. They saw primitive weapons and assumed primitive minds. They laughed at human technology and concluded that humans were no threat to galactic stability. Soon, they would learn the difference between what humans showed the galaxy and what humans were truly capable of. 2 miles beneath the Colorado Rockies, Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked through corridors that officially did not exist. Site Echo had been built in absolute secrecy over the past 5 years, its construction hidden within a larger military mountain complex. Even the workers who built it thought they were expanding storage facilities for outdated equipment. The elevator descended for 3 minutes before finally stopping. When the doors opened, Rodriguez stepped into humanity's greatest secret. The main laboratory stretched across an area the size of 3 football fields. Banks of quantum computers lined the walls, their processing cores cooled at temperatures near absolute zero. Holographic displays showed brain scans, neural pathway maps, and data streams that flowed like rivers of light. Status report. Rodriguez said to her assistant, Dr. Kevin Walsh. Test Subject 7 is ready for integration, Walsh replied, checking his tablet. Captain Tony Valdez has been in preparation for 6 hours. His neural patterns are stable, and we've confirmed compatibility with the Mind Bridge system. Rodriguez nodded and walked toward the center of the lab. There, surrounded by medical equipment that looked more like science fiction than reality, Captain Tony Valdez lay on a specialized chair. Thin cables ran from a helmet-like device on his head to the quantum computers around him. Valdez had volunteered for the program after serving 3 tours protecting human colonies from asteroid impacts and space debris. He was a test pilot, accustomed to risk, but this was different from anything he had ever attempted. How are you feeling, Captain? Rodriguez asked. Like I'm about to become part of the machine, Doc. Valdez replied with a nervous smile. But if this works, it'll be worth it. Rodriguez sat down beside him. Let me explain one more time what's going to happen. Your brain will be connected to our most advanced AI system, but you won't become a machine. Instead, you'll become something new, a human consciousness that can think at the speed of computers while keeping all the creativity and intuition that makes you human. She gestured to displays around them. Every other species in the coalition has evolved specialized thinking patterns. The Vextar process information like living computers, fast and logical, but they can't think outside their programming. The Zelnari think in crystal structures, beautiful and complex, but if you break one part, the whole system fails. And the more done? Valdez asked. They think like flowing gas. They can consider many possibilities at once, but they move slowly and can't make quick decisions. Each species is locked into their evolutionary patterns. Rodriguez pointed to a brain scan on the nearest display. But humans evolved differently. We had to survive in changing environments, deal with unpredictable threats, solve problems that had never existed before. Our brains became adaptation machines. So what makes this connection special? Dr. Walsh joined them, carrying a tablet full of technical data. Captain, when other species developed advanced AI, they created systems that think like they do. Vextar AI is logical but rigid. Zelnari AI is structured but fragile. Human AI is different. It's chaos that somehow creates order. Rodriguez stood and activated a holographic display, showing neural pathways. When we connect your brain to our AI system, you don't just control the computer. You become a hybrid intelligence. You'll have access to vast amounts of data and processing power, but you'll interpret with human intuition, creativity, and adaptability. The Coalition has never seen anything like this, Walsh added. They can't imagine consciousness that changes and adapts in real time. To them, intelligence follows rules. To humans, intelligence breaks rules and makes new ones. Valdez nodded slowly. And they have no idea this technology exists. None, Rodriguez confirmed. For the past 5 years, we've been letting them think we're exactly as primitive as we appear. Every weapon demonstration, every technology exchange, every diplomatic meeting has been carefully designed to reinforce their assumptions about human capabilities. She walked over to a secure terminal and entered her authorization codes. The screen showed files labeled with names like Operation Looking Glass, Project Deep Think, and MindBridge integration protocols. The truth is, Captain, we've been preparing for this contact since we first detected alien signals 8 years ago. We knew that any species capable of interstellar travel would have technology far beyond ours. We also knew that trying to match their technology directly would be impossible. So instead, we focus on our advantages, Walsh continued. Human creativity, adaptability, and our unique neural architecture. We build AI systems that think like humans rather than like machines. We develop technologies that enhance human capabilities rather than replace them. Rodriguez returned to Valdez's side. When you demonstrated our weapons at Nexus Prime, the aliens saw exactly what we wanted them to see, a species with crude technology and predictable thinking patterns. They have no idea that human consciousness can be expanded, networked, and enhanced while remaining fundamentally human. Valdez looked at the equipment surrounding him. So this helmet doesn't just connect me to a computer. No, Captain. It connects you to a network of human-designed AI systems that can process information at quantum speeds while maintaining human intuition and creativity. You'll still be you, but you'll be able to think faster, see patterns that others miss, and adapt to situations in ways that rigid alien minds can't follow. And when they realize what we can really do, Rodriguez smiled grimly. By then, it will be too late. We'll have learned everything about their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses, and they'll be facing an enemy that doesn't think like anything they've encountered before. Walsh began the final preparation sequence. Integration will begin in 60 seconds. Captain, are you ready? Valdez closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I'm ready. As the MindBridge system activated, Rodriguez watched the displays around them light up with activity. Brainwave patterns flowed across screens, showing Valdez's consciousness beginning to merge with the AI network. His neural activity spiked and then stabilized at levels far beyond normal human ranges. Integration successful, Walsh announced. Captain, how do you feel? Valdez opened his eyes, and Rodriguez saw something new there, a depth of awareness that hadn't existed before. I feel expanded, he said slowly. Like I can see connections between things that were invisible before. Test his capabilities, Rodriguez ordered. Walsh activated a complex tactical simulation on the main screen. Captain, you're looking at a space battle involving 47 ships using 12 different weapon types and 6 different tactical doctrines. How long do you need to analyze the optimal strategy? Valdez was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then he began speaking. Blue Force should redirect Ship 7, 12, and 23 to flanking positions, while Ships 4 and 15 create a false retreat pattern. Red Force will respond predictably to the retreat, exposing their command vessel to crossfire from the flanking ships. Estimated time to victory, for minutes, 37 seconds. Walsh stared at his tablet. Captain, that analysis would normally take our best tacticians 6 hours. It's not just faster thinking, Valdez said, sitting up on the chair. It's different thinking. I can see patterns in the battle that follow human psychological principles rather than pure logic. I understand what the commanders are feeling, not just what they're calculating. Rodriguez felt a surge of satisfaction. Project MindBridge had been theoretical for so long that she sometimes doubted it would work. Now, Seeing Valdez demonstrate capabilities that the Coalition couldn't even imagine, she knew humanity had found its edge. "Captain," she said, "welcome to the future of human warfare. The Coalition thinks they're dealing with primitive weapons and simple minds. They're about to discover that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is a human who can think without limits." Commander Nick Foster floated in the command chair of the U.S. Ranger, watching the Astor's field of Kepler 442 through the main view screen. Intelligence reports indicated that Coalition forces were illegally mining human-claimed asteroids, but seeing it with his own eyes still made his anger burn. 3 massive Vextar mining ships hung among the asteroids like metal spiders, their mechanical arms tearing chunks of valuable minerals from rocks that belonged to humanity. Smaller transport vessels ferried the stolen materials toward a processing station that definitely had not been there when humans first surveyed the system. "They're not even trying to hide it," said Lieutenant Sarah Kim from a navigation station. "Those are our mining claims, filed and registered with the Coalition." Foster nodded grimly. 6 months had passed since the humiliating meeting at Nexus Prime. In that time, Coalition forces had grown increasingly bold in their treatment of human space. They took what they wanted and dared humanity to stop them. "Incoming transmission, sir," reported Communications Officer Danny Martinez. "It's from the lead mining vessel. Put it through." The view screen filled with the image of a Vextar commander, its compound eyes reflecting rainbow colors in the artificial light of its ship's bridge. "Human vessel," it said in the mechanical tone that all Vextar used. "You are approaching a restricted work zone. Alter your course immediately." Foster kept his expression calm. "This is Commander Foster of the United Earthship Ranger. You're operating in human-claimed space without authorization. Please explain your presence here." The Vextar's antennae twitched in what Foster had learned was their equivalent of dismissive laughter. "Commander Foster, your species' claims in this region have been reassigned to more capable civilizations. The Coalition has determined that humans lack the technology to efficiently extract these resources. I don't recall humanity agreeing to any reassignment. Protectorate species do not require consultation for resource reallocation decisions," the Vextar replied. "Your primitive mining techniques would waste 60% of available materials. We are preventing ecological damage." Foster felt the familiar weight of the Mindbridge interface helmet in his hands. Dr. Rodriguez had installed the system on the Ranger in absolute secrecy, with only Foster and his most trusted officers knowing its true capabilities. To anyone scanning the ship, it would appear to be a standard human vessel with kinetic weapons and basic defenses. "Commander," the Vextar continued, "you will withdraw from this area immediately. Your weapons pose no threat to Coalition vessels, and any aggressive action will be reported as evidence of human instability." Foster looked at his crew. They had trained for this moment for months, running simulations and practicing with equipment that officially did not exist. Now it was time to see if humanity's real weapons worked as well in reality as they did in theory. "Lieutenant Kim, maintain current course," Foster ordered. "Martinez, record everything. This is going to be interesting." He placed the Mindbridge helmet on his head and activated the connection. Immediately, Foster felt his consciousness expand beyond the confines of his skull. The ship's sensors became extensions of his senses. The navigation computer merged with his spatial awareness, and the tactical system integrated with his strategic thinking. But more than that, Foster could suddenly perceive the Vextar ships with impossible clarity. The Mindbridge system analyzed their energy signatures, weapon configurations, shield frequencies, and even the communication patterns between vessels. In seconds, Foster understood more about Vextar military technology than human intelligence had gathered in months of observation. All vessels, this is Mining Commander Clickstow, came a transmission that the aliens thought was private. Human ship approaching. Standard intimidation protocol. If they do not withdraw, disable their engines but avoid destruction. Dead humans generate paperwork. Foster smiled. The Mindbridge system had cracked their communication encryption without them even noticing. He could hear every word they said, understand their tactical plans, and analyze their psychological responses in real time. The 3 Vextar ships began moving into formation. their weapons charging with energy patterns that Foster's enhanced perception could see like colored lights. They were preparing to disable the Rangers' engines, confident that human weapons could not penetrate their shields. "Sir," reported Weapons Officer Carol Stevens, "they're targeting our propulsion systems." "I see them, Carol," Foster replied, his voice calm despite the incredible amount of information flowing through his consciousness. "Everyone hold steady." The Vextar opened fire with precise energy beams designed to cripple rather than destroy. But Foster was already moving the Ranger before they pulled their triggers. The Mind Bridge system had analyzed their targeting computers, predicted their firing solutions, and calculated evasion patterns that seemed impossible to outside observers. The Ranger danced between the energy beams like a leaf in the wind. To the Vextar, it must have looked like incredible luck. They had no way to know that Foster was reading their intentions directly from their own computers. Impossible. Transmitted mining commander Clixtal. Random evasion patterns. Increased firepower. Foster was already inside their communication network, learning their language in real time and understanding their tactical doctrine. The Vextar thought in pure logic, which made their responses predictable once you understood their programming. The alien ships increased their rate of fire, filling space with energy beams that should have overwhelmed any target. But Foster guided the Ranger through the storm of weapons fire with surgical precision. Every movement was calculated not just to avoid the current attacks, but to position the ship for optimal counterfire. "Carol," Foster said quietly, "target their shield generators. Fire when ready." The Rangers' kinetic cannons, primitive weapons that the Coalition had mocked, fired with perfect timing. The projectiles struck the Vextar ships at the exact moments when their shields cycled between defensive frequencies. What should have been ineffective attacks instead penetrated their defenses and disabled key systems. "How did they know our shield rotation frequency?" transmitted one of the Vextar pilots. Foster almost answered before remembering that they couldn't know he was listening. Instead, he continued his surgical strikes, targeting communication arrays, weapon systems, and propulsion units with the kind of precision that seemed impossible using primitive targeting systems. The battle lasted exactly 12 seconds. When it ended, all 3 Vextar mining ships were adrift, their weapons disabled, and their engines offline. None of them had been destroyed. Foster had specifically avoided causing casualties, knowing that dead aliens would provoke a much stronger response than merely embarrassed ones. "This is Commander Foster to all Coalition vessels." He transmitted on open channels. "Please evacuate human space immediately. We'll provide assistance with repairs once you're beyond our territorial boundaries." The response was a long silence. Finally, Mining Commander Clixtal replied, his mechanical voice carrying what might have been confusion. "How did you? What kind of targeting system?" "We got lucky," Foster replied with a straight face. Sometimes primitive weapons work better than expected. As the Coalition ships limped away from the asteroid field, Foster removed the Mind Bridge helmet and felt his consciousness contract back to normal human limits. The sensation was like trying to see through a keyhole after having panoramic vision. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kim, "they're leaving the system." "Good," Foster replied. "Martinez, make sure our sensor logs show standard human equipment and capabilities. Nothing that would indicate advanced targeting systems or unusual tactical awareness." "Already done, sir," Martinez confirmed. "To outside observers, it will look like you made some very good guesses and got extremely lucky." Foster looked back at the asteroid field, now free of alien mining operations. The test had been successful. The Mind Bridge system worked perfectly in combat conditions. More importantly, the Vextar had no idea what had really happened to them. "Course for Earth, Lieutenant," Foster ordered. "I think Dr. Rodriguez will want to hear about this." As the Ranger jumped to faster-than-light travel, Foster reflected on what they had accomplished. The Coalition still thought humans were primitive and predictable. They would report this incident as a statistical anomaly, bad luck that had allowed inferior technology to achieve an impossible result. They would continue to underestimate humanity right up until the moment they realized their mistake. And by then, it would be far too late. Admiral Kethmore the Mordun floated in the command chamber of the Coalition flagship, its gaseous form shifting with satisfaction as reports flowed in from across the fleet. 312 vessels from 6 different species surrounded the Sol system like a metal storm cloud, blocking every possible escape route. The humans had finally pushed too far. Their interference with legitimate mining operations in the Kepler 442 system had been reported as an unprovoked attack on Coalition personnel. The recent incident where a single human ship had somehow disabled 3 Vextar vessels was being called a terrorist act by some Coalition members. Status report, Kethmore commanded, its voice carrying to the ship's atmospheric processors. Commander Zhuaixtho of the Vextar appeared on the communication display, its compound eyes reflecting the lights of its own bridge. All battle groups are in position, Admiral. The human homeworld is completely surrounded. Their primitive sensors cannot even detect half of our vessels. And their military response? Kethmore asked. Predictably chaotic, replied Captain Shindar of the Zelnari contingent, its crystalline form chiming softly as it spoke. Human communication networks are filled with conflicting orders and panicked discussions. Their military leaders appear to be arguing among themselves about whether to surrender or attempt resistance. Kethmore rippled with amusement. The Coalition had been monitoring human communications for weeks, watching their primitive government struggle with the approaching crisis. Earth's leaders seemed genuinely unprepared for military confrontation with advanced civilizations. Their president has requested another diplomatic meeting, reported the intelligence officer. She claims humanity wants to resolve this peacefully. Of course they do, Zhuaixtho chittered. They know their weapons cannot challenge Coalition technology. This show of force should convince even the most stubborn humans that resistance is futile. Kethmore extended its consciousness through the fleet's communication network, feeling the confidence of 300 captains and their crews. This was the largest Coalition military operation in 50 years, assembled to demonstrate overwhelming superiority to a single primitive species. Open a channel to Earth, the Admiral commanded. The main display activated, showing the face of President Maria Gonzalez in what appeared to be a hastily organized command center. Behind her, human military officers moved with the kind of barely controlled panic that Kethmore had seen in dozens of species facing their first contact with superior civilizations. Admiral Kethmore, President Gonzalez said, her voice steady despite the fear that was obvious in her body language. We appreciate the Coalition's willingness to communicate before taking any irreversible actions. President Gonzalez, Kethmore replied, allowing its voice to carry the weight of absolute authority. Your species has committed acts of aggression against legitimate Coalition operations. The attack on mining vessels in the Kepler system cannot be ignored. Our ship was defending legally claimed human territory, Gonzalez protested, but her tone suggested she knew the argument was hopeless. Protectorate species do not have territorial claims. Commander Zhuaixtho interjected. Your status within the Coalition grants you protection and guidance, not sovereignty over star systems. Kethmore watched President Gonzalez's face carefully. The human leader's expression showed the same pattern the Admiral had observed in 17 other species during his long career. Initial defiance followed by growing realization of their helplessness. What are the Coalition's demands? Gonzalez asked quietly. Immediate surrender of all human military vessels and weapons, Kethmore replied. Acceptance of Coalition oversight for all human colonies and industrial operations. Removal of human claims to star systems beyond your home system, and submission to a process of accelerated civilization development under Coalition guidance. You're asking us to give up our independence. We are offering to save your species from itself, corrected Captain Shindar. Human behavior has become increasingly erratic and violent. Left unchecked, you will destroy yourselves within a generation. President Gonzalez was quiet for a long moment, apparently consulting with advisors who were not visible on the screen. When she looked back at the camera, Kethmore saw something that looked like resignation in her eyes. Admiral, she said finally, humanity has always valued courage over wisdom. If you intend to force us into submission, you'll have to do it the hard way. Kethmore rippled with what might have been respect. Even facing impossible odds, the humans chose to maintain their dignity. It was a trait the Admiral had seen in several species, though it always ended the same way. Very well, President Gonzalez, you have 1 hour to reconsider. After that, we will demonstrate the consequences of defying the coalition." The transmission ended, leaving Keth Moore alone with the fleet commanders. Around them, 300 coalition warships prepared for what would certainly be the shortest military engagement in galactic history. "All ships report ready, Admiral," announced the tactical coordinator. "Human defensive positions are clearly marked. Their orbital platforms are armed with the same primitive kinetic weapons we observed at Nexus Prime." Keth Moore studied the tactical display, showing Earth's defenses. Orbital stations surrounded the planet like a metal necklace. Their weapons trained on the Coalition fleet. A few dozen human ships had taken defensive positions, their crews probably saying goodbye to their families. "Begin the attack," Keth Moore commanded. "Disable their platforms and ships. Minimize casualties. We want them alive to learn from this experience." Across the Coalition fleet, massive weapon systems came online. Energy cannons that could vaporize asteroids charged to minimum power settings. Exotic matter projectiles loaded with non-lethal payloads prepared to launch. The humans would be overwhelmed in minutes without losing a single life. The first wave of Coalition fire streaked toward Earth's orbital defenses in streams of light that painted space in rainbow colors. Keth Moore watched with professional satisfaction as the precisely calculated strikes approached their targets. Then something impossible happened. Every human defensive platform and ship began moving at the exact same instant. Not random evasion patterns or panic flight, but coordinated movement that seemed to flow like a single living organism. The Coalition weapons, aimed at where the human platforms had been, struck empty space. "What?" Commander Zextol's voice carried confusion that Keth Moore had never heard from a Vextar before. The human platforms returned fire with their primitive kinetic weapons, but their targeting was somehow perfect. Projectiles that should have been easily deflected by Coalition shields instead struck at precisely the right moments and angles to penetrate defensive systems. "How are they coordinating their movements?" Captain Shindar asked, its crystalline voice ringing with alarm. Their communication networks show no increase in traffic patterns. Keth Moore extended its consciousness deeper into the fleet's sensor network, trying to understand what it was witnessing. The humans were fighting like a single mind controlling hundreds of bodies. Their ships moved in patterns that defied everything the Coalition knew about human military doctrine. "Admiral," the tactical coordinator reported, "we're losing ships. The humans are targeting specific system vulnerabilities that shouldn't be visible to their sensors." On the display, Coalition vessels began going dark as human weapons found their weak points with surgical precision. Shield generators, weapon systems, and propulsion units were being disabled by primitive projectiles that somehow knew exactly where to strike. "This is impossible," Zewixthal transmitted from his flagship, which was now listing to one side after a kinetic round had penetrated its primary power coupling. "They're using our own tactical frequencies against us." Keth Moore felt something it had not experienced in 3 centuries of military service uncertainty. The humans were not just fighting back, they were winning. Their crude weapons were systematically dismantling the most advanced fleet in Coalition history. "All ships, withdraw at a safe distance," Keth Moore commanded, its gaseous form churning with confusion and growing fear. "Regroup and analyze human capabilities." As the Coalition fleet retreated beyond the orbit of Neptune, Admiral Keth Moore stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 20 minutes, humanity had forced a withdrawal of 300 advanced warships using weapons that the Coalition had dismissed as primitive toys. "Admiral," the intelligence officer reported, "preliminary analysis suggests the humans have developed some form of instantaneous coordination system. Every ship and platform is responding as if controlled by a single tactical intelligence." Keth Moore's form rippled with the realization that the Coalition had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that primitive weapons meant primitive thinking. They had believed that chaotic human behavior indicated inferior intelligence. They had been wrong about everything. "Send a priority transmission to Coalition Command," Keth Moore ordered, its voice heavy with the weight of failure. "Request immediate reinforcements and authorization to use maximum force. We are not facing the primitive species we expected. As reports of the battle spread across Coalition space, 300 ship captains tried to explain how they had been defeated by weapons that should not have posed any threat to their advanced technology. None of them suspected that they had just encountered humanity's real weapon for the first time. Captain Tony Valdez no longer existed as a single consciousness. He was the Earth Defense Network, the orbital platforms, the patrol ships, and the quantum computers that connected them all through the Mind Bridge system. His awareness had expanded to encompass humanity's entire military response to the Coalition invasion. From his physical location in Site Echo, 2 miles beneath the Colorado Rockies, Valdez experienced a battle from 300 different perspectives simultaneously. He was a gunner on Platform 7 who fired the shot that disabled the Vextar flagship. He was a pilot of the cruiser Defiant who executed an impossible turn that avoided a Mordun energy blast. He was a sensor operator on Luna Base who tracked incoming projectiles and calculated interception courses. But more than that, he was something entirely new. A human consciousness merged with artificial intelligence, creating a hybrid intelligence that could think faster than computers while maintaining human intuition and creativity. Valdez's status report came Dr. Rodriguez's voice through the communication system. "We're winning, Doc." Valdez replied, his physical voice calm while his expanded consciousness orchestrated a battle across millions of cubic miles of space. The Coalition fleet is retreating. They have no idea what they're facing. On the displays around Site Echo, the battle played out in real time. Coalition energy beams that should have vaporized human platforms instead struck empty space, as every defensive position moved with perfect coordination. Human kinetic weapons found their targets with accuracy that seemed supernatural, striking Coalition vessels at exactly the right moments to penetrate their shields. "How are you coordinating so many units?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, watching the tactical display with amazement. "I'm not coordinating them," Valdez explained, his consciousness simultaneously calculating firing solutions for 17 different weapon platforms. "I am them. Every ship, every platform, every defensive system is an extension of my awareness." Lieutenant Angela Martinez floated in the command chair of the UES Liberty, her own mind bridge helmet connecting her consciousness to Valdez's expanded network. Through the link, she could feel the thoughts and experiences of dozens of other human pilots and gunners, all of them connected in a web of shared awareness. "Incoming Zelnari energy barrage," Martinez reported, though Valdez was already aware of the attack through his omnipresent sensors. "They're targeting the lunar defense grid." "I see it," Valdez replied to the network. "Counter battery fire in 3 seconds." Martinez felt her consciousness merge with the targeting computers of 6 orbital platforms. The mathematical complexity of the firing solution filled her awareness. Trajectory calculations, shield frequency analysis, timing sequences that had to be perfect to the microsecond. But instead of overwhelming her human mind, the Mind Bridge system allowed her to understand it all intuitively. The platforms fired in perfect unison, their projectiles converging on the Zelnari ships at precisely the moments when their crystalline shields rotated between defensive frequencies. The alien vessel's own weapons, already fired at what they thought were stationary targets, missed completely as the human platforms moved in formation like a school of fish. "Impossible targeting," transmitted a Zelnari captain, its crystalline voice ringing with confusion. "They're predicting our shield rotations." Martinez smiled grimly. The Coalition species thought in rigid patterns because they had evolved for specific environments and never needed to change. The Zelnari processed information in crystalline matrices that were beautiful but inflexible. When humans connected to their communication networks, those rigid patterns became predictable. Meanwhile, Commander Nick Foster commanded a squadron of human cruisers that moved through space like dancers performing a choreographed routine. Through his mind bridge connection, he was simultaneously aware of every Coalition ship's position, energy signature, and tactical intentions. "Foster, take your squadron to the Mordun formation," Valdez instructed. "Their gaseous thinking patterns make them slow to adapt to changing situations." Foster felt his consciousness expand to encompass all 12 ships in his squadron. Their movements became extensions of his will, guided by tactical insights that combined human intuition with computer speed processing. The cruisers accelerated toward the Mordun battle group, their formation shifting and flowing like liquid. Human squadron approaching. Transmitted Admiral Kethmore from his flagship. Standard encirclement pattern. Deploy energy nets. But Foster was already inside their communication network, understanding their tactical doctrine before they executed it. The Mordun thought like flowing gas. They could consider many possibilities, but moved slowly and predictably. Foster's squadron scattered just before the energy nets deployed, then reformed in a configuration that the Mordun couldn't track. "They're inside our defensive perimeter," reported a Mordun captain, its gaseous form churning with confusion. How did they predict our deployment pattern? Foster's cruisers fired their kinetic weapons with surgical precision, targeting the specific frequencies that disrupted Mordun energy containment fields. The alien ships found themselves unable to maintain cohesion as their atmospheric processors failed one by one. Throughout the solar system, the same pattern repeated. Human forces that should have been overwhelmed by superior technology instead fought with impossible coordination and precision. Every coalition advantage was anticipated and countered. Every weakness was exploited with mathematical perfection. Admiral reported a Vextar intelligence officer to Commander ZYXTHUL. "The humans are using our own communication frequencies against us. Somehow, they're inside our networks." "Impossible," ZYXTHUL replied, its mechanical voice carrying stress harmonics that Vextar had not evolved to express. "Our encryption systems are quantum-based. No primitive species could crack them." But even as it spoke, the Vextar commander could feel something alien moving through its ship's computer systems. Not malicious code or destructive viruses, but something far more disturbing: consciousness. Human minds were exploring Vextar technology, learning their systems in real time, and turning their own weapons against them. "They're in our targeting computers," reported the Vextar weapons officer. "Our cannons are firing on our own ships." ZYXTHUL watched in horror as Vextar vessels began attacking each other, their logical targeting systems rewritten by human consciousness that understood both technology and psychology better than the aliens understood themselves. Back in Site Echo, Dr. Rodriguez watched the tactical display with growing amazement. "Valdez, you're not just winning. You're demonstrating capabilities that will change everything." "That's the point, Doc," Valdez replied, his expanded consciousness now encompassing over 400 human vessels and defensive platforms. The Coalition thought they were facing primitive weapons and simple minds. They had no idea that human consciousness could be expanded, networked, and enhanced while remaining essentially human. What happens when they realize what you really are? Valdez was quiet for a moment, processing tactical data from across the solar system while simultaneously analyzing Coalition communication patterns and psychological responses. "They won't realize it," he said finally. "Their rigid thinking patterns won't let them understand what they're seeing. They'll assume we develop some new technology, not that we become something they can't comprehend." The Battle of Seoul continued for another 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt after the first 20 minutes. The Coalition fleet, despite its overwhelming technological superiority, found itself outmatched by an enemy that fought with perfect coordination, impossible precision, and tactical awareness that seemed almost supernatural. When Admiral Kethmore finally ordered a full retreat, 60 Coalition vessels had been disabled and captured, 200 more had suffered significant damage, and not a single human ship had been destroyed. As the alien fleet limped away from Earth, Captain Valdez began the process of slowly withdrawing his consciousness from the defense network. The sensation was like trying to pour an ocean into a coffee cup. His expanded awareness compressed back into the confines of a single human brain. "Status report," he said to Dr. Rodriguez, his voice tired but satisfied. "Complete victory," she replied. "And more importantly, complete surprise. The Coalition has no idea what hit them." Valdez nodded, removing his Mindbridge helmet. They thought they were fighting primitive humans with crude weapons. Instead, they encountered something that has never existed before: human consciousness unbound by biological limitations, but enhanced by human creativity and adaptability. On the tactical displays around them, the retreating Coalition fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, carrying news of their defeat back to alien homeworlds. News that would spread confusion and fear throughout civilizations that had never encountered an enemy they couldn't understand. What's our next move? Rodriguez asked. Valdez smiled, feeling the weight of humanity's secret weapon in his enhanced memories. Now we wait. The Coalition will try to analyze what happened here. They'll study our tactics, examine our technology, and search for explanations that fit their rigid understanding of intelligence and warfare. And when they can't find any, then they'll make the same mistake they've been making all along. They'll assume we're still primitive, just luckier than they expected. And that assumption will be their downfall. Commander Nick Foster's consciousness followed the retreating Coalition fleet like a ghost in their machines. Through the mind bridge connection, his awareness had spread throughout the alien ships during the battle, and some part of him remained embedded in their systems even as they fled toward Coalition space. He sat in the command chair of the U.S. Ranger, his physical body millions of miles away from his expanded consciousness, watching the aftermath of humanity's greatest victory unfold through alien eyes. The Coalition commanders had no idea that human intelligence was still with them, observing their discussions, learning their secrets, and mapping their weaknesses. "Foster, what's your status?" came Captain Valdez's voice through the secure communication link. "I'm aboard 17 different Coalition vessels," Foster replied, his voice calm despite the incredible complexity of experiencing multiple realities simultaneously. They're in complete disarray. None of them understand what happened at Earth. Through the communication systems of the Vextar flagship, Foster listened as Admiral Keth Moore tried to explain their defeat to Coalition High Command. The Moore Dunn's gaseous form churned with confusion and something that might have been fear. "The humans demonstrated capabilities that should not exist," Keth Moore reported. "Their ships move with perfect coordination. Their weapons target our vulnerabilities with impossible precision, and their tactics adapted faster than our computers could process." The response came from Supreme Commander Velthak, a member of the ancient Kethran species that had founded the Coalition centuries ago. "Admiral, you commanded the largest fleet assembled in 50 years. Are you claiming that primitive humans defeated 300 advanced warships?" Foster could feel Keth Moore's embarrassment through the ship's atmospheric processors. "Sir, I am reporting that human military capabilities far exceed our intelligence estimates. They may have developed some form of instantaneous communication system that allows perfect coordination between their forces." "Impossible," interrupted Commander ZYXTHUL from the Vextar command ship. "Our sensors detected no unusual energy signatures or exotic technologies. Their weapons were the same primitive kinetic systems we observed at Nexus Prime." Foster almost laughed. The Coalition's rigid thinking patterns were preventing them from understanding what they had encountered. They could only process information that fit their existing understanding of technology and warfare. The concept of consciousness itself becoming a weapon was beyond their ability to comprehend. Through the crystalline communication matrix of a Zelnari cruiser, Foster observed their attempt to analyze the battle. The aliens had recorded every moment of the engagement, studying human tactics with the desperate intensity of a species that had never experienced defeat. The human defensive platforms moved in mathematical patterns that suggest quantum-level processing, reported Captain Shindar, its crystalline form resonating with frustrated harmonics. But our scans show no quantum computers aboard their ships. "Perhaps they have developed artificial intelligence systems that we cannot detect," suggested another Zelnari officer. Foster smiled at how close they were to the truth, while remaining completely wrong. The Coalition understood artificial intelligence. They had created AI systems that thought like their respective species. What they couldn't imagine was consciousness that could expand beyond biological limits, while remaining fundamentally human. "We need to inform the other Coalition members," Admiral Keth Moore decided. "If humans possess this level of military capability, every species in the galaxy needs to be aware of the threat." Through his connection to the alien communication networks, Foster began mapping Coalition space with precision that human intelligence had never achieved. He observed their industrial centers, military installations, political structures, and technological capabilities. More importantly, he began to understand their psychological weaknesses. The Vextar processed information with perfect logic, but couldn't adapt when their assumptions proved wrong. The Zelnari thought in crystalline patterns that were beautiful but shattered when stressed beyond their design parameters. The Moore Dunn considered many possibilities simultaneously, but made decisions slowly and predictably. Every coalition species had evolved to fill specific environmental niches, developing specialized capabilities that made them powerful within their areas of expertise, but inflexible when facing unexpected challenges. They had never needed to adapt because they had never encountered anything truly alien to their understanding. "Foster, are you getting all this?" asked Dr. Rodriguez from Site Echo. "Every bit of it, Doc," Foster replied, simultaneously recording tactical data from dozens of alien sources. "The Coalition is more advanced than we thought in some areas, but weaker in others. They've spent so long being the dominant powers that they've forgotten how to deal with genuine surprises." Through the sensor network of a more done exploration vessel, Foster discovered something that made his physical body sit up straighter in his command chair. The ship was conducting deep space surveys near the edge of Coalition territory, searching for new civilizations to contact. "Dr. Rodriguez," Foster said urgently, "you need to see this." The information flowed to the Mind Bridge network to Site Echo, where tactical displays immediately showed what Foster had discovered. The Coalition wasn't just the 12 species they claimed to represent. They were actively suppressing at least 6 younger civilizations that showed potential for rapid development. "They're keeping other species primitive on purpose," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying new understanding. "The Coalition maintains their dominance by preventing anyone else from advancing." Foster accessed the historical databases of multiple Coalition ships, learning the truth about galactic civilization that had never been shared with humanity. The Coalition's peaceful expansion had actually involved the systematic suppression of any species that showed unusual adaptability or innovative thinking. "Look at this," Foster transmitted, sharing data about a species called the Kethmali. They developed quantum communication technology 50 years ago. The Coalition classified them as unstable and placed them under permanent observation. Their research was confiscated for safety reasons. More examples followed. The Vrentar had created AI systems that thought in nonlinear patterns, making them incredibly creative problem solvers. Coalition intervention had restricted their research to approved areas of study. The Morkes had developed biological enhancements that allowed their consciousness to interface directly with their technology. Coalition advisors had declared such modifications dangerous to galactic stability. "Every species that might challenge Coalition dominance has been neutralized," Rodriguez concluded. "They don't just maintain order, they prevent evolution." Foster felt his consciousness expanding even further as he accessed more Coalition databases. The scope of their control was staggering. They monitored every developing civilization, intervening whenever a species showed signs of unusual capability or innovative thinking. Which explains why they were so confident about us, Foster realized. They've successfully managed dozens of species that looked primitive but had hidden potential. They thought we were just another problem to be solved through superior technology and political pressure. "But we're different," Rodriguez said. "We're different because we've been preparing for them since before first contact." Foster agreed. Every other species they encountered was discovered accidentally and had to respond to Coalition contact without preparation. We knew they were coming and developed our capabilities in secret. Through the communication systems of the retreating fleet, Foster watched as news of the Battle of Souls spread throughout Coalition space. The response was predictable. Disbelief followed by demands for more information, then growing concern as the reports were confirmed. But what interested Foster most was what the Coalition didn't understand. They were analyzing human tactics, studying battle recordings, and searching for technological explanations for their defeat. None of them suspected that human consciousness was still among them, learning their secrets while they struggled to comprehend their failure. "Foster, how long can you maintain connection to their networks?" asked Captain Valdez. "As long as I want," Foster replied, feeling the vast web of alien technology that his consciousness now inhabited. "They have no idea I'm here. Their security systems are designed to detect hostile software, not hostile consciousness. Then stay with them." Valdez decided. "Learn everything you can about Coalition capabilities, weaknesses, and plans. When they return to Earth, and they will return, we'll be ready." Foster nodded, settling in for what will be a long journey through Coalition space. His physical body would remain aboard the Ranger, but his consciousness would travel with the alien fleet, observing their civilization from inside and preparing humanity for the larger conflict that was surely coming. As the coalition ships disappeared into the depths of space, carrying their human observer with them, Foster reflected on what they had already learned. The galaxy was not the peaceful confederation of equals that the coalition presented to new species. It was an empire built on the suppression of innovation and the prevention of change. But empires that stopped evolving eventually faced forces they couldn't adapt to survive. And humanity, Foster realized with growing satisfaction, was exactly the kind of evolutionary pressure that rigid civilizations couldn't withstand. The coalition thought they were retreating to regroup and return with greater force. They had no idea they were carrying the seeds of their own transformation back to their homeworlds. 1 year after Battle of Sol, Captain Jake Morrison walked the corridors of Nexus Prime once again. But this time, everything was different. The same alien architecture surrounded him. The same living metal walls shifted colors as he passed. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Where once he'd been treated as a representative of a primitive species, seeking admission to an exclusive club, now Morrison commanded respect that bordered on fear. The coalition delegates who had laughed at human weapons now watched him with the careful attention reserved for dangerous predators. Captain Morrison, said Diplomat Veltar, the same blue-skinned alien who had guided humanity's first delegation, the coalition representatives are prepared for your presentation. Morrison nodded politely. But both of them knew this wasn't a request for membership anymore. Humanity had moved far beyond needing the coalition's approval for anything. The meeting chamber looked the same, but the seating arrangements told the real story. Where once humans had sat in a small section, reserved for junior members, now Morrison occupied the central position. Representatives from 6 coalition species sat around him in a careful circle, while 3 empty chairs represented species that had chosen not to attend. Members of the coalition, Morrison began, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages. Humanity appreciates your willingness to discuss the future of galactic civilization. Commander ZYX shifted uncomfortably in its specialized chair. The Vexstar's compound eyes reflected Morrison's image dozens of times, creating a kaleidoscope effect that somehow made the alien seem smaller than before. Captain, ZYX said, its mechanical voice carrying overtones of strain. The coalition acknowledges that our initial assessment of human capabilities was incomplete. Morrison almost smiled. Incomplete was certainly one way to describe the coalition's spectacular failure to understand humanity's true nature. We've come to propose a new framework for interstellar relations, Morrison continued. The Adaptive Alliance, a confederation based on mutual growth, innovation, and the freedom to evolve. The reaction was immediate. Captain Shindar's crystalline form resonated with what could only be called alarm. Captain Morrison, the current system has maintained peace for over 2 centuries. Change introduces instability. Stability without growth is stagnation, Morrison replied. And stagnation, as we've learned, eventually faces forces it can't adapt to survive. Through the Mindbridge network, Morrison was simultaneously aware of similar conversations happening throughout the galaxy. Commander Foster's consciousness had spent months observing coalition space, and the information he'd gathered had fundamentally changed humanity's understanding of galactic civilization. The coalition wasn't just reluctant to change, they were terrified of it. For centuries, they had maintained their dominance by preventing other species from developing technologies or capabilities that might challenge the established order. Innovation was seen as a threat to stability, and adaptation was actively discouraged. Captain, said Admiral Kethmore, its gaseous form swirling with nervous energy, humanity's recent actions have created significant concern among coalition members. Your interference with our resource allocation programs, your unauthorized expansion into disputed territories, your unusual military capabilities. Morrison looked around the chamber, noting which species met his eyes and which ones avoided direct contact. The psychological profiles that Dr. Rodriguez had developed proved remarkably accurate. The Vextar were struggling to process information that didn't fit their logical frameworks. The Zelnari were experiencing stress fractures in their crystalline thinking patterns. The Mordun were trying to flow around the problem rather than confront it directly. Admiral, Morrison said calmly, Humanity's actions have been entirely defensive. We've simply refused to accept the limitations that the Coalition attempted to impose on us. Limitations that ensure galactic stability, insisted Captain Shindar. Limitations that prevent growth, Morrison corrected. We've discovered that the Coalition has systematically suppressed technological and social development in dozens of species. The galaxy could be centuries ahead of where it is now if innovation had been encouraged rather than controlled. The silence that followed was uncomfortable for everyone except Morrison. Through Foster's intelligence network, humanity now knew more about Coalition operations than most Coalition members did. They knew about the secret programs that restricted certain types of research, the political pressures applied to species that showed too much independence, the careful management of resources to maintain dependency relationships. What exactly is humanity proposing? Asked a new voice. Morrison turned to see Representative Colvan of the Ethmiri, a species that had joined the Coalition only 50 years ago. The Ethmiri were young, ambitious, and increasingly frustrated with Coalition restrictions on their development. Freedom to evolve, Morrison said simply. The Adaptive Alliance would be a confederation of equals, sharing knowledge and resources while encouraging each member species to develop their unique capabilities. And military protection? Colvan pressed. The Coalition provides security against hostile forces. Morrison's smile was genuine this time. Representative Colvan, after the Battle of Seoul, do you really think the Adaptive Alliance would need protection from anyone? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Every being in the chamber knew that humanity had defeated the largest Coalition fleet ever assembled, using weapons that appeared primitive but somehow achieved impossible results. None of them understood how it had happened, but they all understood the implications. Captain Morrison, Commander Zhuaixthal said finally, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't use its capabilities to dominate other species the way the Coalition has? Because domination requires suppressing change, and change is what makes us human, Morrison replied. We don't want to control the galaxy. We want to see what the galaxy can become when every species is free to reach its full potential. Through the Mind Bridge network, Morrison felt the subtle influence of human consciousness spread throughout Nexus Prime's computer systems, not to control or damage, but to demonstrate. For just a moment, the station's environmental controls shifted to create perfect atmospheric conditions for every species present. The lighting adjusted to optimal frequencies for each type of vision. The temperature regulated itself to zones of comfort that should have been impossible to achieve simultaneously. Then, as quickly as it had changed, everything returned to normal. How did you do that? Whispered Representative Colvan, its voice filled with wonder rather than fear. Adaptation, Morrison said simply. We learned your needs, understood your preferences, and found a way to accommodate everyone without disadvantaging anyone. That's what the Adaptive Alliance offers. Solutions that work for everyone because we're willing to change our approach until we find what works. Over the following weeks, Morrison held private meetings with representatives from dozens of species, not just Coalition members, but also the suppressed civilizations that Foster had discovered, the restricted species that were kept under Coalition oversight, and the developing worlds that had never been allowed to reach their potential. The response was overwhelming. Species that had spent centuries under Coalition control suddenly saw possibilities they had never imagined. The Kethmali wanted to share their quantum communication technology freely. The Vrentar offered their nonlinear AI systems to anyone who could benefit from them. The Morkes proposed biological enhancement programs that could benefit multiple species. Captain, Dr. Rodriguez said during one of their regular briefings, we're getting membership applications faster than we can process them. 43 species have formally requested to join the Adaptive Alliance. What about the Coalition's response? Morrison asked. Mixed, Rodriguez replied, displaying political analysis on her tablet. The older species are trying to maintain control, but the younger members are openly expressing interest in our model. We're looking at a fundamental shift in galactic civilization. 6 months later, Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, humanity's first deep space diplomatic facility. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from dozens of species docked at the station's ports. Vextar vessels shared space with Zelnari cruisers, while HFY science ships work alongside human exploration vessels. "Captain," said Commander Foster, joining him at the viewing window. Foster's consciousness now spent most of its time distributed across the Alliance communication network, coordinating information exchange between species that had never been allowed to share knowledge freely. "How's the integration proceeding?" Morrison asked. "Better than anyone dared hope," Foster replied. "The Keth-Mali quantum communication system has revolutionized our coordination capabilities. The Vrentar AI is helping us solve problems we didn't even know existed, and the Morquez biological enhancements are allowing direct neural interfaces that make the Mind Bridge system look primitive." Morrison smiled as he watched a group of mixed-species researchers working together on what appeared to be some kind of new propulsion system. Humans, HFY, and even a few reformed Vextar were collaborating on technology that none of them could have developed alone. "What about the old coalition?" he asked. "Still trying to understand what happened to them," Foster said with amusement. "They keep analyzing the Battle of Seoul, searching for technological explanations for their defeat. Some of their scientists are beginning to suspect that consciousness itself might be more powerful than they realize, but their leadership can't accept such a radical concept." A communication alert sounded, and Morrison activated his personal display. The message was from Commander ZYXTHO, requesting another meeting. But this time, the Vextar wasn't representing the Coalition. It was submitting a formal application for its home system to join the Adaptive Alliance. "They're finally starting to understand," Morrison said, reading the application with satisfaction. "What's that, Captain?" Foster asked. Morrison looked back at the busy scene outside the station, where species that had been kept apart for centuries were now working together to solve problems and explore possibilities that none of them had imagined alone. "They're starting to understand that the real weapon was never technology or tactics or superior firepower," he said. "The real weapon was a willingness to change, to adapt, to become something new when the situation demands it." Through the Mind Bridge network, Morrison felt the pulse of a new kind of civilization spreading across the galaxy, not the rigid hierarchy of the Coalition, where each species was locked into predetermined roles, but a dynamic web of relationships where change was encouraged and innovation was celebrated. The Coalition had laughed at human weapons because they thought they understood what made civilizations powerful. They believed in the supremacy of advanced technology, the stability of unchanging systems, and the safety of predictable patterns. They had never imagined that the most dangerous force in the universe might be the simple human refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they were. As Morrison watched ships from dozens of worlds working together in the space around New Geneva Station, he realized that humanity had given the galaxy something it had never possessed before, the freedom to become whatever it chose to be. The old galaxy had been a place where each species knew its place and followed predetermined paths. The new galaxy was becoming something unprecedented, a civilization based not on control, but on the endless human capacity to adapt, change, and grow. And that, Morrison reflected with deep satisfaction.